Hello, everyone. My name is Kyla Hannington, and I'm the Public Outreach and Engagement Division Manager with the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights, the county's civil and human rights education and enforcement agency. Our office investigates complaints of civil rights discrimination, combats human trafficking, ensures equitable language access to county government resources, and builds programming to educate on civil rights and social justice and to build community across the diverseness that is our county. With me today, co-hosting are Tiana Davis from the Office of Human Rights and Dr. Audrey Lau from the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. And it is our pleasure to welcome you to another episode of Social Justice and Community, our partnership series with the Prince George's County Memorial Library System and the University of Maryland. This series was brought to you by Dr. Chris Marsh, and it looks at questions like, how does human rights research impact our communities? How does scholarship on human rights violations or issues of social justice have any meaning in our day-to-day lives? And what is being discussed, studied, and thought about in universities today? I got to tell you that today is actually the last in our series for the spring. And I'm going to take a moment to just say that it has been so incredible. And I really believe I speak for myself and my other two co-hosts here today when I say that it's just been such a privilege to get to be here week after week and learn from such completely interesting people. And for those of you watching at home, the fact that you've chosen to tune in with us and join us has just been awesome. I do want to let you know that we are coming back in September. We're continuing all throughout the next school year, so stay tuned to that. It really has just been a thrill to be here, and it's an honor for us to be part of it. So today, for our final spring 2024 episode, we have Roger Isom Jr. presenting Physical Activity for Health Literacy's Sake. Author Roger Isom is a public health professional trained in physical activity program design and evaluation from George Washington University. He is a doctoral student at the University of Maryland School of Public Health. Roger believes that physical activity has far-reaching benefits beyond physical health concerns, that human movement yields positive benefits in all areas of health and well-being. He founded Walk Time Books to share this public health message authentically and visually through creative storytelling. Roger, it's so wonderful to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and share some of my work that all flows into advancing justice for all.
Oh, do you want us to put your, we got it.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry. So my title of this kind of presentation is Social Justice and Community, Physical Activity for Health Literacy's Sake. And before I get into that, I always like to just level set and, do my responsibility to introduce a little bit more about myself. I'm a public health practitioner trained in program design and evaluation with over 5 years experience working in government. I am currently a PhD student at the University of Maryland School of Public Health, where I focus on physical cultural studies, understanding of human movement. So really thinking about movement in terms of social justice and understanding power and power relations as it relates to the human body and how it moves. And then lastly, I'm an author of A Walk Through Memory Lane, which is my debut picture book about meaningful physical activity that I'll share some elements of with you today. But again, really thinking about centering the human experience behind physical activity, sport, exercise, however you move. With that, I wanted to share a little bit about how my research, my practice, and advocacy is all channeled through Walk Time Books. And how I define that is a public health initiative to reimagine physical activity as individual expression, culture, and community health. So the key takeaway here again is individual expression. Think of it as however the way you move, that is an extension of your identity, of your way of expressing yourself. Culture, recognizing that movement has some type of cultural norms and understanding and practice that is to be celebrated, and also thinking about community health. There is a way in which, if we think about social justice movements, there's actually been movement in various forms that's actually benefited to a thriving community that raises awareness on issues that still remain prevalent today, that raises acknowledgement of the past, but also gives directions and steps to move forward. So we really like to channel in all those dimensions of physical activity within Walk Time Books that we think often is not praised enough in the literature, which really focuses physical activity from a risk prevention or chronic disease prevention standpoint. So with that big challenge we hope to address the way we want to do it is through meeting people where they are to facilitate meaningful dialogue on physical activity through visually focused public health resources. So really thinking about how can we use the visual art telling mediums to kind of as a mode of communication around physical activity as culture, individual expression, and community health. So with that, I just wanted to just take a deep pause and like center ourselves in this moment to just have you internally reflect about what does physical activity mean to you? So I'll just give like a brief 30 seconds, really just sit with that. What does physical activity mean to you? And so I was intentional. I did want to hold some space so that it can ground level and ground set our conversation moving forward. I feel like that's a question that we don't often get asked. What does it mean to you? And so with that, I wanted to, whatever meaning that you've came up with in this setting today, hold on to it. All right. Don't let it go. It's your lucky penny because I want you to hold on to it and see how it responds to how governmental organizations or research institutions have defined physical activity. So from the World Health Organization, we see that they define physical activity as any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that requires energy expenditure. So if you think about this definition, it really encompasses a whole lot of movement. Even just raising my arms repetitively as if I'm at like a football game, that can be considered physical activity. There is movement produced by my skeletal muscles that is requiring an energy expenditure. Now, I may not feel it right now, but if I keep going while I'm doing this whole presentation, I'll feel a little bit of some beads of sweat form on my forehead. Now, the physical activity guidelines is another document that nationally recognizes recommendations on how to get people to be physically active because of the definition we saw before, where it's any bodily movement that produced by skeletal muscles that results in energy expenditure. So with a host of scientific knowledge out there, there's a body of work that says any amount of a small amount of physical activity does good for the body. Now, ideally, we would like you to have a routine, more moderate to rigorously physical activity through long durations of time. But we recognize that even just 10 minutes can give you some benefits, right? So this physical activity guidelines, which is a free available resource, turns out, although it's been around for about 20 years or so and has two iterations of it, the first being in 2008 and now in 2018, only 1 in 10 US adults are aware of the guidelines. So we have this freely available resource of scientific and governmental knowledge and resources available that can direct you to a lot of programming around physical activity that allows you to move your way. But there's a gap in the communication of how it's not landing to the people because it is not aware of or known about that it exists. So this is where I started to turn and the health literacy part comes into mind because with all the resources available and the knowledge out there, where is the disconnect or the discrepancy? And that's when I started to realize the personal health literacy might need to come into play and have some deeper understanding because the definition I gave you by the World Health Organization, followed by the physical activity guidelines, how does that align with your own definition of what does physical activity mean to you? And so when you look at this definition, CDC defines health literacy as the degree to which individuals have the ability to find, understand, and use information and services to inform health-related decisions and actions for themselves and others. So it's really adding the agency that it's not about going to the doctor and your doctor tells you to, you got to be more physically active, do this X, Y, Z, and the third. It's really thinking about that team-based care of ensuring that individuals are given information in a way that they can process, understand, and come to an empowering point of decision as it relates to any health need. And that health need can be related to medication. It could be related to health behaviors, such as physical activity, and other types of concerns related to the health. And I'm preparing you all to see that this is a very individual-based definition. Like the framework is the onus on the individual to process and decipher information as it relates to the action of their health needs, which does play a part. But where I'm starting to shift and put the social justice in is highlighting the organizational health literacy. And this is where we start to understand that from CDC's definition, the degree to which organizations equitably enable individuals to find, understand, and use information and services to inform health-related decisions and actions for themselves and others. So here we're starting to see that we're going to step up and ensuring that it's not just about the individual's capacity to make informed decisions, but also the organizations being equipped to provide the information that is sound, especially in the wake of misinformation, disinformation, and false information. And so, with that call to action, um, I challenge or really advocate through my research for organizations who make decisions as it relates to health, not only from the individual level, but all throughout the levels of family unit, the community unit to the state level, to the federal level, to really think about our decisions and the impacts it has and shapes on people's health decisions and health opportunities. And that is why I come with Michael Jackson's one of his famous songs is Make That Change, starting with the man in the mirror, or in this case, starting with the organization in the mirror, and really having us sit with how do our decisions impact one's ability to have increased health literacy as it relates to fulfilling their definition of a meaningful physical activity. And so, with that, I'm recognizing in the field that there is a shift that has taken place and continues to take place. We're shifting from the individual and we're shifting from the, putting heavy emphasis on the onus of the individual to make these changes and looking at our built environment and recognizing through physical cultural studies, we recognize that the human body has an interaction with and relationship with the built environment that shapes the opportunities and access and availability and quality of physical activity opportunities. So with that, I have a few bullets of some guiding principles that situate my work and research. And it's expanding from individual health interventions to looking at policies, systems, and environmental strategies to promote population level physical activity. So one example of that is I live in Prince George's County, and I recognize that now when I go to the store, I have to make sure I have reusable bags. Because if I don't, I have to pay for that bag. Now, a few years back, I didn't have to. But there's been a policy in place that now shapes or has an influence on my behavior, where I'm at the Safeway, I'm just getting to my car in the parking lot, and I'm at Safeway, and it's like, okay, oh, my bags aren't in the car. Do I want to go back, or am I prepared to pay the fee to purchase the bags at that at Safeway? And so we're starting to look at that same paradigm shift with physical activity, thinking about what policies, systems, and environmental strategies are shaping people's behavior. And when we start to look at that, we start to recognize there's a social justice element, and that some policies and systems and environmental decisions that have occurred before our existence have an underlying cause of racism and race relations that needs to be acknowledged, addressed, and dealt with. And so the next thing is, with that expansion from individual health to the built environment, we're moving with intention across the social ecological model of health. So we are now recognizing that it's not just about focusing on individual and its existence, but also the different layers that exist in our society. So thinking about the circle of life. And so there's the family unit, there's the state unit, there's the federal unit, there's actually a global unit. How do all of these things coexist and interact and shape existence as we know it? And so with that, I look at it like an onion, and that there's many, many layers that shape our understanding of physical activity. And that is one of the shifts that we're now starting to recognize we need to take and be prepared for that journey. Because when we think about what is known, and this goes to my third point, how do we align bottom-up advocacy solutions to top-down problems? And this is where I kind of bring my positionality in, and where I feel like my advocacy really comes in, because I see a lot of communities who have been and continue to be engaged in social justice issues and advancing health equity and a just society. But our advocacy and solutions have got to really be understood that we're responding to top-down problems. And this where it's coming back to that organizational health literacy. Because if physical activity, right, is shaped by the built environment, it is shaped by policy systems and environmental strategies, we have to hold an understanding of accountability to the folks at top who are making those decisions, that the people bottom up are saying, hey, on the ground, this is not right, or this is why I can't go out and walk because my body may be policed due to the color of my skin. We got to figure something out. And so with that, we're really starting to focus on professionals hired to actively shape these spaces and places that exist in our built environment. And I often kind of reframe it in the way of the folks who are getting paid to make these decisions, right? The folks who are in positions of power, who were voted in to make these decisions, all those folks who are in a kind of a professional performing capacity, we have to start holding them accountable when it relates to physical activity and maybe even assessing their own individual health literacy as well as organizational health literacy, so that we can make sure we're not perpetuating the former physical activity definition of like exercise, walk on the treadmill until your legs fall off, or no pain, no gain, right? We're moving beyond that. And so we have to make sure that they're equipped because they are making these decisions that shape these spaces and places that we exist in. And lastly, another pillar of my kind of emerging research, because I haven't got my letters yet, my PhD letters, but I'm still working towards it, is providing those tools and resources for folks to make those informed decisions. So given the, expanding from individual health interventions to moving with intention to aligning bottom-up advocacy to top-down problems and focusing on accountability, I recognize that there needs to be tools and resources available that are digestible for the public consumption, that speak to equity, authentically, transparently, and visibly. Because when we think about this kind of growth mindset posture, I kind of look out with the old in with the new. Now we're looking at the built environment and how that shapes our physical activity. That means we're thinking about, and this is something I had to face, because again, my bio says I'm focused in program design and evaluation. So I can take a group of people, I can formulate a 12-month program that, gets you active, that thinks from the individual to like community level. But when I had to look about how we design the built environment, I had to equip my vocabulary and understanding of like zoning laws, voting decisions, policy designs, building codes, a whole host of stuff that I was trying to stay away from in my my academic training. But now I realize I have to confront it, because how we build these environments, I'm recognizing it's not that when you build it, oh, let's just build that park, they will come. We're moving to a growth mindset of if you design it with communities, right? If you design it with them, then they are already there. If you design the blueprint with them, then they're already there at the ribbon cutting, right? And so with this growth mindset, it's really important to, and I'll go back, to think about these core pillars as we shift from the individual to the built environment. Because my goal in adjusting social injustice and promoting health equity and just a way for us to thrive is that whatever your meaningful physical activity is that you shared and thought about internally at the beginning, we design the built environment to be welcoming and inclusive for that physical activity. And so the other element I wanted to add to kind of bring it up a greater framework is the general theory of walkability. So this book, A Walkable City, is by an architect named Jeff Speck, who frames that there's 4 optimal conditions necessary for pedestrian travel. So people are more likely to walk if the environment they are in is useful, safe, whether that's objectively safe or perceived safe, comfortable, and interesting. If these 4 optimal conditions are present, then we are more likely to see people to walk. Now, I do want to hold and put intentionality to recognize that walking is an activity that majority of folks can participate in, but not everyone. But with this general theory of walkability, it is an understanding that if you design places for walkability, as walking as the common denominator, then a host of other types of movements can exist. So it's really not saying that we're trying to get everybody to walk, but using the idea that if we can create a space that's allowable for walking or wheelchair rolling, then that opens up the door for a host of other types of physical activity and movement. And the other element in my research that I'm most recently starting to explore is Afrofuturism in action. And so the National Museum of African American History and Culture, they actually have an exhibit on Afrofuturism that inspired me with understanding a deeper dive of this literature. And they define Afrofuturism as expressing the notions of Black identity, agency, and freedom through art, creative works, and activism that envision liberated futures for Black life. And so I really wanted to pair this or include this framework into my evolving research because I hope to not only acknowledge the racial injustice as it relates to physical activity and movement, not only strategize how to make the current situation better, but also to give light of thinking about a future reimagined. There's possibilities that through through Black excellence, I think we can reimagine and put words behind this is how the world ought to be. And with defining that and putting headspace to that, we can crystallize it and work towards making it tangible. And I say all of this particularly in the context of physical activity. And that is why I said Walk Time Books aims to reimagine physical activity as individual expression, culture, and community health. That's my just world for us to celebrate that definition because it's moving away from that risk prevention understanding of physical activity. So no longer saying, let's go, I got to work out because I want to manage my hypertension or fight off diabetes or attack obesity. Even language like that is very harsh. It's very negative. It's very aggressive when it's like, you know what, I want to be able to walk outside, wheelchair roll, or just get away from my physical environment in the office just to like celebrate that it's a nice day. And that is good enough, So just trying to create that world of possibilities. And so I'm soon wrapping up to say, again, one of my pillars is to start to build tools and resources that do a better job that I'm able to today of like putting in all those complex layers together. And so my current debut book that's coming out is A Walk Through Memory Lane. And this is the first output of Walk Time Books and sets the standard for the type of public health resources that center physical activity that we want to promote. And so here's the link is on walktimebooks.com to learn more about it. This book is about an intergenerational relationship between a grandmother and a grandchild, where the grandmother unfortunately has to leave her home due to her early onset dementia diagnosis. And so with that, Elijah, the young grandchild, says, I have got to be there for my grandmother. I have got to help her out. I got to figure out a solution. And so the story unfolds in how Elijah uses physical activity to come up with his solution. And with that, this book focuses on brain health. It focuses on physical activity and its connection with place attachment, that built environment, how we coexist with the built environment and how the built environment actually has a relationship with us. So those are the main themes in the book that I want to preface. The book aims to start as an entry point. So for families, for professionals, anyone who wants to take kind of all the elements I said today and kind of have another entry point where it's visually displayed, this is what that resource is. So that it prompts you to say, wow, I never really kind of thought about that. And then leads you to kind of spurs your curiosity for more information around the topic. So it's not saying that these books are the end all be all, but with my research, I'm starting to explore how can we address health literacy as it relates to physical activity through visually focused storytelling that then that ignites that curiosity to learn more. And I will end off. I want to give you guys a sneak peek. I told myself I had to do something special for this group. And so this is more dissertation work. So way down the line, but it's my second book that looks at how libraries actually serve as an inclusive space for physical activity and how we can reimagine libraries to no longer be just that place of quiet, no talking, but they actually serve a host of resources, a host of services, a host of programming. And we wanted to show or reimagine physical activity through, hey, there's ways we can design the physical space of a library with community engagement to actually be a space for physical activity. And so Here's just a little storyboard. Again, early draft phases. I actually just worked with my illustrator to get these kind of created a few days ago. And then I said, let me pop this in here just to show you, like, again, there's power in storytelling, and there is power in reimagining physical activity as culture, as an extension of who you are, as an expression, and community health. And that is what my research, my practice, and advocacy hopes and aims to do through Walk Time Books. And so with that, I will pass it over to the amazing facilitators who welcome me into this space and leave space for any questions, thoughts, reflections, rebuttals, all the above.
That was great. Thank you so much. And so let me just say for people watching, please type any questions that you have into the chat, questions or comments. We will share them with Roger as they come in. I have a lot of questions. I was writing them down over here. So if you saw me looking over here, I was making notes on the screen. We have a regular viewer who comes to, I think, all of the library programs. And because we partner with the library a lot, we also get to see her. Her name is Ms. Vivian, and I have not seen her in the chat yet, but she often asks a wonderful question to start us off. So I'm going to channel my inner Ms. Vivian right now, and I'm going to ask you, how did you come to focus on this area?
Through reflections of my academic educational journey. In high school, I've always been an ambitious person to start programs or just have an idea and like execute. And so I started at Broadneck High School. I went there and I started a club called Broadneck Fitness Club. And the idea was, hey, the school's a central location. We have the gym, we have all types of like physical activity spaces. Let's just form a club that's similar to like the academic clubs available on high school campus, and just, be physically active. And as I was trying to recruit folks to join, it was really hard. And I was like, why is this really hard? It's not like we're doing sports or, exercise. It's just physical activity, anything that is meaningful to us. And I used that kind of reflection when I started to go into college at McDaniel College for my undergrad, and I studied exercise science. And I said, okay, given my experience with leading the Broadneck Fitness Club, let me try to intervene earlier and try to inspire younger kids to maybe have a more different relationship with physical activity. Because even when I was recruiting in high school, I had a lot of people respond, oh, I'm not an athlete. And I was like, I'm not an athlete. So just trying to challenge those misconceptions and notions around physical activity and movement. In undergrad at McDaniel College, I started a club called Fitness Buddies, which was a mentoring program where college students who had similar thoughts with me as far as physical activity, we worked with the local Boys and Girls Club and held physical activity sessions with the children there. But when I got to my master's program, where I wanted to get strengthen my skill set in programming, design, and evaluation after getting my degree in exercise science, that's when I was told by my amazing professor, Dr. Loretta DiPietro, about the shift, and that we're moving beyond the individual focus of the physical activity and more about walkable communities, more about inclusive communities, more about the built environment. And so that's where that shift really cemented, where I was like, okay, if I'm going to embark on this journey with the underlying tone of advancing social justice in the space of physical activity, I have to kind of situate myself in this work.
It's interesting. Thank you very much.
I guess I will jump in now. So with Walk Time Books, is your organization currently or interested in working with communities or municipalities or organizations to work toward the health literacy or the organizational equity? And if so, what does that look like?
So we definitely aim to that be our goal, where we partner with communities. Right now, from my kind of research doctoral hat, and with the school semester just ending, that's kind of really my identity that I carry. I'm working on just understanding like the research implications behind the work. So I don't want to falsely advertise and say Walk Time Books, it's the best, without really sitting back and be like, no, what is its impact? There's a lot of intentionality behind everything that Walk Time Books does, from the character development, the world building, the plot building. We try to just factor in all of those different elements. And so right now we're in the early phases of just trying to piece things together and actually start to produce a little bit more visual resources or samples, so people can kind of further conceptualize what we're trying to do. But I will say from the research side, my ultimate goal would be the American Psychology Association. They have, I believe, Imagination Press, where scholars are able to produce publications around certain type of psychology topics, but in the forms of children's picture books. And I was like, that would be amazing to have for physical activity, where we're focusing the inclusive, equitable, diverse kind of nuances of physical activity through picture books that counter that risk prevention kind of narrative that has been the dominating narrative for some time. So I would still love to work with the communities, but I think also working with reframing how institutions are producing research around physical activity through kind of like the publication communications.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your the built environment concept. It's something I'm really familiar with, and I was just wondering if you could kind of expand on that a little bit.
For sure. So the built environment, as I've learned to define it, is any human-made element that is made in the earth that wasn't here before humans existed. And so a lot of times we tell people, and this is where I actually challenge. So again, I always mix my research, my practice, and just being a Black American identity kind of together, because I was conflicted. You know, public health, I remember like Let's Move, Michelle Obama campaign, you know, go outside and play, just go outside. And I struggled because I said, yes, but for some communities, that's a vastly different lived experience that could be where some folks don't return home. And so I struggled with that. And I'm like, why is that? And so when I started to look at the built environment, I started to realize the built environment has opportunities or infrastructure that shapes those physical activity experiences. It just does, where you say go outside, but it's like I have no sidewalks, or the lighting is not adequate throughout the streets. So my safety now perceived is kind of at jeopardy. So just those different elements that, you know, I never thought about until I started to do this understanding, you know, in research, where I was like, wow. And so I remember sometimes like connectivity of streets, like in the theory of walkability. So if I walk where I live, I can get a Slurpee at 7-Eleven when it's hot. And then there's a park where a bench, I can rest my feet, right? So even like the designs of those built environments is so interesting, because I'll speak for myself. I took it for granted. I just really never thought much about it. And when you have this lens of the built environment paired with physical activity, you start to notice so many connections that may explain why you aren't as physically active as you want to be. And I love that awakening, because it shows that it's not your fault, right? There's another dimension that we have to contend with. And that's what the built environment really does shape, even from the air quality to climate change. We're starting to recognize that I bought winter gloves for the winter and I didn't have to use them. So I was like, can I still return them even though it's been a few months? So those different elements go within the built environment domain.
I want to go back to something you said in your presentation, but you just mentioned it when you were responding to Tiana too, which is this. I love the way you talked about physical activity and you separated it from like this risk prevention attitude. Because, you know, when you gave us, you know, all the viewers, you said, okay, take 30 seconds and think about physical activity. Well, I'm a larger person and have been, you know, for very many years, so I'll say, well, 50 years, very long time, trying to like, or disliking my physical, the way I my shape in the world, right? And feeling there was something wrong with that shape. And so there, which is a whole nother, let's look for next week. But but what that has meant though, is that physical activity for me from a very young age, like a really like a little child age, was punitive. Because there's something wrong with you. So we have to be active to try to fix this part of you that's broken or unacceptable or something. As opposed to, so when we did this 30 seconds, I spent like the first 15 seconds and I wrote it down. I said, what does physical activity mean to you? I said, it kind of feels bad for me. But then I had another 15 seconds and I thought, well, actually, like, it means just going outside. And I had come like, but that was not my first thought. And then I got there. And then as you continue with the presentation, you said like physical, it's like just going outside because it's a nice day. And I'm so grateful for you to be talking about this and teasing it out. And I wanted just to hear more from you about that, because I get the impression you're saying it's like, it's not like you're doing it, but it's also this maybe seismic shift in how we look I guess, sort of collectively about activity?
Yes. So many great points, and thank you for sharing that. One of the things I always have to bring to attention is that there is a difference between exercise and there's a difference between physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
Exercise is goal oriented, there's a routine to it, and there's a certain type of focus, effort behind it, versus physical activity encompasses exercise, but so much more. And so what I'm recognizing is that a lot of times sport, exercise, physical activity are used interchangeably. And where I try to advocate, especially thinking about organizational health literacy, is to professionals, because I've actually been in presentations where they're talking about exercise, but they're framing it as if exercise is physical activity, but not saying, no, we're going to talk about exercise, which is a particular type of physical activity. And so if you don't see yourself as like an exercise, like healthism, like that, if that's not like a lifestyle you kind of see yourself into, you can feel some type of way when you're reading that type of presentation, right? And what I started to recognize is that when I have these conversations about like reimagining or revolutionizing ourselves or divorcing ourselves from kind of like a narrow definition of physical activity, people start to see that liberation because they realize from childhood all the way to now, wow, that's why I had this type of contentious relationship with movement or physical activity, because I like moving, but I don't like moving in the context of a gym.
Right.
But when I do jump rope on Saturdays with my friends, I'm enjoying it. And like, that counts. And so that it's with the social justice element, there's an element of like healing, because I've had the same where I was like, I'm not an athlete, I don't like sport, because the reason, circling back to one of the former questions, in exercise science, a lot of the folks I was around, or our population were athletes and trying to improve their performance. And I was like, yeah, that's not what I'm trying to do. I mean, it's needed, but that's not the skill set I want to build. I said, they already have motivation to be active. I want to shift to more of the general population. For some, it's just like maybe redesigning your home space to promote physical activity, right? So with that shift, I think there's a lot of healing that needs to come with this type of reawakening of physical activity, because a lot of times we're told to go to the doctors and then we're being examined, right? What does that, from a physical cultural study standpoint, we're looking at what's that power relation dynamic of, to go to the doctors and be examined. And for some, and it's not to say don't go to the doctors, I'm not advocating that, but when you're told, okay, yeah, so in terms of your BMI, this is what it is, be physically active, get more exercise.
Right.
And it's like, no, we need time to break that down. And that's where the health literacy comes in, so that this encouragement or this recommendation, you can be informed on how you achieve that goal of being more active in a way that's meaningful to you. But to taper your question, it's like, it's really important to divorce yourself from your previous notions of physical activity if it's rooted in a very negative space, as most people have experienced.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I can jump in, and because I'm the librarian here, so I get to. You just made my day when you said all of the things that you said, and I'm gonna just focus on the library programming that we do, and Prince George's County does this pretty well. I think in our library system, it's something that we have our bibliobop instead of just a children's reading, everybody sit down. There's always a movement element to almost all of our story times. But we're also starting to get into, we partner with Joe's Movement Emporium. We have a lot of partnerships with groups in the community. And that's something that we've, like you said, we're no longer just the place where we shh everybody. We're really not. And I mean, we are the last third space, this place between work and home. And, we're very, health and wellness, especially after the pandemic, really became like a kind of a pivotal part of our goals as a library system. And so I'm really thankful that you have noticed, but also I think it's just a really great concept. But I actually wanted to jump to the Afrofuturism part, because I think it's really interesting that you've connected to that. It's, usually considered like very sci-fi, it's kind of nerdy. And here we are talking about health and exercise and everything. So could you talk a little bit more about like what inspires you out of that? Have you read a lot? Are you into a lot of those authors or?
So I am, this was something that I think developed maybe within the last year when I went to the museum to experience that exhibit, and I was able to actually start putting words behind some of my just inherent likings for science fiction and Afrofuturism, particularly Black Panther, Marvel Black Panther. Like I'm a big Black Panther superhero fan, and so I actually went to the museum, saw the costume there, and so that really spurred a lot. And one of the things right now is I'll say, invite me back next time and I'll be more advanced of knowing more of the literature. But I did want to hold space to this present and to create exposure around that Afrofuturism. What I really was drawn to was the future reimagined, like really thinking about the possibilities of a space, of a place, of a life, and speaking to that. Because what I've recognized in my research is that we can identify a lot of the historical shortcomings of race and race relations in America. We can kind of promote like solutions, but we never really think about, okay, what does it look like when we made it? Like really sit with it. When you wake up the next day and go get coffee, what does that experience look like? And so I really want to use Walk Time Books to kind of be a grounding hub to really think, to open up that conversation of what does it look like when we've made it? So I know we're fighting for and advocating for relentlessly a just world, but I want to add to that, what does it look like when we've made it? And I'll circle that back to your comments about the library, because I think that's where the Afrofuturism comes in, because from the organizational health literacy standpoint, right, and putting onus on organizations and thinking about policy systems, environments, this has now created me a lane to further advocate in the active living physical activity space for we need to put more funding and support to libraries. Because when I go to conferences or spaces amongst researchers and public health professionals, and we talk about physical activity and promotion within different populations, oftentimes we refer to the schools. But I'm like, the schools is one space, but the one thing that emerges is that how do you make a school space not only for the children, but also other members of the community? And I'm over here like, but the library, they are already positioned to think about the inclusive communities. That's why there's so many services and opportunities available. So if they are already within their nature positioned in that posture, let's maybe direct some funding and research around like amplifying that. So like to support the policy systems, environmental changes. So to crystallize that, I'll say a lot of times we think about like safe routes to schools. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how do we ensure safe routes to libraries or shared use agreements with schools? What about shared use agreements with libraries? And it's not to say that these things aren't occurring, but I'm like, not to y'all, but like to my colleagues, I'm like, there's something that's untapped. Like there's this hidden diamond in the rough that is thriving, is a community asset. And with, I think, Afrofuturism, it allows for me to kind of circle people back to be like, hey, you know that library, or you know that barbershop, or you know that little kind of like cutoff space at the end of the neighborhood. Its intended purpose might have been this, but it also serves other things. And I'll say one last thing to that is most prevalent examples are parking lots. And I think COVID really highlighted that. Parking lots were kind of viewed as a space for your car, right? Or a vehicle. But when COVID, I started to see like at my Target where, you now can drive your car up, open the hood, and they can bring your groceries out and put it in your trunk. And now that's a permanent fixture where they've now painted those designated parking spots for that type of use. And so I'm over here saying, well, if we can structure, repurpose a parking lot for that, we can definitely repurpose it for physical activity and pedestrian travel and pedestrian safety. And that also then circles back to thinking about health and safety and the Vision Zero initiatives that we have in the district. How do we make sure that when people are out and about, that they're not dying due to vehicle crashes or other pedestrian fatalities, right? And so I try to use Afrofuturism to kind of circle back to reimagining these spaces that we may kind of not really give a second look. But with this framework, you can go like, wow, parking lot. I'm sorry. I kind of limit you to this kind of use, but I see that you have more use. And so let's explore that.
I promise I didn't pay him to say any of that. I promise.
I will say I'm a PhD student, so libraries is like my second home.
We love the libraries. It's
yeah,
true.
I was going to say, you know, if you need a part-time job or whatever you need, you know, we're always looking for good people. So, and we're always looking for good partnerships. I mean, so, you know, please like keep us in mind, because one of the things that I know, we have a new walking program at Bowie Library. And I keep saying there's a school right next door. Maybe we could use the track. You know, it's about making those community connections. But I cannot speak more highly of Afrofuturism. I'm a huge fan, so we can trade some books later. But
perfect.
But I really, that it's really great, and I swear I didn't pay him to say any of that. So.
Well, I think we all heard the job offer. So I wanted to talk about, you said something again really early on. You talked about, I tried to write it down, and I don't think I got the quote right, but talking about physical activity as individual expression, culture, and health. And as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, of course, physical activity is cultural. But until you said it, I hadn't thought about that. And so I was hoping you to talk more about that, because I think I just really want to highlight it.
Yes. I studied abroad in my undergrad experience, and I went to Colombia for 5 months, and just from being in two different places in the world, you could just feel there was a different vibe. Mm-hmm. And I started to celebrate that, the way they moved about, the way, how they got to A to B and B to A, just the vibe. And it's not to say one was better or worse. It's just, you just notice that difference. And that's when I started to realize you can't just, you can't put physical activity in a bottle and one size fits all. To bring it home in DC, I was always perplexed when I would go to like Georgetown and notice its own unique features. And then when I'm in Anacostia and notice its own unique features. In Anacostia, I would always marvel at all like the public art, and Frederick Douglass home is there, and like National Historic Landmark, and just different vibes that from a geographical cultural standpoint, right? I recognize there's a difference here. And you can sometimes feel it, I think, subconsciously, or from the people. You can always tell sometimes certain features when from certain dialects or languages or just ways of being, kind of swag in certain areas of wow, there's distinctions with that. And so I wanted to make sure that was celebrated, because that is part of physical activity and culture kind of are intertwined. And so just making sure we have an understanding of that awareness, because it's something that should be celebrated and put at the forefront as you start thinking about physical activity programming and design, as well as the built environment. I would like to give one prime example of, in DC, there was the whole, Don't Mute DC initiative and advocacy, right? In which in a certain area in DC, there's go-go music that was often played at this one store establishment. And there was contention around that, the noise complaints, or it's just, go-go and the noise in the area. There was contention around it's too much noise or this, that, and other folks this has always been here. This is part of the landmark and fabric of that area. And so exploring those kind of different dynamics just shows that there's physical activity present, because again, when you think about going outside and walking, you can tell if there's a difference in the vibe in the culture. I can feel when I'm walking in DC versus when I'm walking in Maryland, even if my eyes are closed. And so, because I could be like, hey, I'm not hearing my go-go. Where's my go-go? You know what I mean? What happened? And so just bringing in those elements so that when we think about environments and policies and systems, that's factored in so that a culture is not lost as we try to promote physical activity.
I love that. Thank you very much. I can keep going, but Tiana or Audrey, do you have one?
I do. So you're local to Prince George's County. What are some of your favorite ways to get physical activity in Prince George's or in Greater Maryland in the DMV?
Through A Walk Through Memory Lane, the picture book I shared, I really enjoy walking. So that book was inspired by my relationship with my grandmother, who passed away in 2022 due to dementia. And I think that's where the Afrofuturism comes in, because the book is a blend of my professional practice in public health, my research in physical activity, but also my personal lived experience. And so with that blend, my grandmother would love to go walking. That was the way she was able to maintain her physical functioning and physical independence. And so I would take her walking in downtown Annapolis, and we would just keep walking. And when I'm tired, she would still want to walk. I'm like, okay, it's about you. So I'm your caregiver. That's great. And so now that she's deceased, for me, like continue my walks through the trails of Prince George's County and Bowie, and at times in Annapolis, that's how I get my physical activity in. And I feel like each step I take, even though she's not with me in the physical presence, I can just feel her presence with me. And so that's my physical activity. So sometimes when I go to the doctors, I'm like, we're going to have to break physical activity down, because how I try to get my physical activity in might be a little bit different than how you may be conceptualizing it. But I'm really grateful that for trails and connectivity that they provide, and that as I am walking and thinking and reflecting on my grandmother, when I do get a little thirsty, there's like stores or shops available for me to get some drinks. And then what I also love about walking in Prince George's County is that, and I kind of praise this in the book, is that walking adventures bring surprises. I remember one time I was walking in the Bowie Town Center, and all of a sudden there was like a food truck parade, or like food trucks were out. And I was like, what? And so like I was walking, I just had not known. If I was staying at home and I didn't see any announcements of it, it was just be that natural walking adventure. And so I was able to get, try out different food truck items, but then also have conversation with the folks who are waiting in line. And so, yeah, my meaningful physical activity in Prince George's County would be walking.
I love that. It's very, are they called flaneurs? Is that how they say it? I'm not really up on my lingo right now, but like I know Charles Dickens used to walk through Victorian London, and places that we would think are really dangerous, at least, and I really do. I think I want to ask you, when you say we cannot walk because our bodies are policed, that's a really serious issue in our community still. And when you talk about imagining a future, that's the future I imagine, that everyone can go outside and walk in their community and without fear, not just fear from other like things happening to them, or, but also of being policed. I mean, that is a really, if you could speak to that a little bit, because not everyone has that experience, but I know that it's something that since I moved in this area, there is a heaviness to walking in the neighborhood.
Yes, and it's often one of the responses raised when folks are talking about, let's promote physical activity. In the audience, someone raises up, but like, how can we walk when police surveillance or just community safety is an extreme issue? My, response to that is, I think it's very important to design solutions, to design understanding with communities. That's why I shared in the presentation about that growth mindset. You have to design it with them so that they are already there. And that's not only related to like building, infrastructure of the built environment. It's also the social cultural element, the culture that we've talked about, because those conversations have to be made, and not about having attendance of community members are there. You have to engage them in ways that can elicit deeper understanding for them, help them foster greater understanding. So a lot of the things I try to do in this presentation was like, not say like, here's physical activity and here are some ways you can do it, right? It's like, how can we engage folks so that when that question is asked, we can really go beneath the surface of solutions, potential solutions that are co-created with folks. And so because it's an alarming issue, it is an issue that has been long-standing. And unfortunately, in my space, I often see the response of just, well, put more police on the streets. And I'm not here to serve as like if that's bad or good or not, that's not the sake. But it's like sometimes the first solution does not mean it's the solution that needs to be. And so I think really integrating into the fabric of research or evaluation question around this issue, and having those diverse community members from the start of that research, evaluation, kind of social justice question, all throughout the phase of the process is very important, because what I feel like is happening is that those community members are not centralized into the planning, implementation, and evaluation of community safety efforts. I feel like they're heard to a certain degree, but not like integrated into the fabric.
Right.
I think we have time for one more question, so I'm going to jump in here with this. You talked about advocacy and this bottom-up advocacy to top-down problems, and I'm really interested in that, and like how, I think you're using bottom-up advocacy. I'm thinking that's maybe how I would understand like a grassroots kind of work, right? And looking about advocacy needing to understand that even though we're coming from the bottom up, we're dealing with top-down problems. So how does that look like? How do advocates, like for those of us who who work in the field, or people who are listening who are like doing this work on their own or want to go out and advocate for their problems, like how does that framework of recognizing it's a top-down problem impact your advocacy efforts?
I think it expands the advocacy efforts that grassroots organizations have been doing. And so I always look at this as an added on, not like a deficiency model. Like you're not achieving what you've been trying to achieve because you haven't been doing it. It's more like, hey, add this to your arsenal, because when you start to use that health literacy, and it'll reframe your ask. So when you go to your council, or when you go to the doctor, or when you go to a community proposal event, you'll have more understand more information that you can digest, and to produce more expansive responses that will then hold people accountable, because it's like, hey, we're advocating for parks, but we can go beyond, like not just a park for a park, but like we're advocating for parks that are intergenerational, so that all types of movement can take place, not just for children, but for older adults, but they can also coexist. Or we're making sure that you're not just being compliant with ADA regulations, but you're going beyond of thinking about how can you make sure that movement isn't truly inclusive for folks, no matter their mobility needs, right? So it's like, I really hope the health literacy element can help elevate the advocacy ask or demand, I would say, that will then in response hold folks accountable to that. Now, their execution, like the organizations, like the higher up, like the top down, their execution, that's not saying it's always going to be implemented, but I always like to say, at least we have on record that it was asked. So that gives me something to respond to from the public health perspective. I always kind of say like, hey, once you open up that door, once you frame the ask, now you've given me something to respond to, because I can say, hey, this is what the people are saying. But right now, what's currently happening is I get the exercise response, or we need gyms, or we need standing desk. But it doesn't go as far as like, no, let's really think about this new building you're having us go to. Let's make sure it allows for meaningful physical activity. The stairwells that you provide, let's like have it be an art exhibit. Have it fixtured where there's different things that changes to where I'm like intrigued to actually go down it. Don't make it look like a, scary, like dark in the corner alley staircase, right? So I would say just health literacy for Walk Time Book's sake is really thinking about equipping the grassroots organizations with these tools and resources so they continue to do the great work that they're doing. Because I want to acknowledge they are doing the darn thing.
Roger, this has been great. So everybody at home, we've been putting some links in the chat and also on screen. Go to walktimebooks.com to see what Roger has going on, get a copy of his book, which is coming out.
Yes, coming soon in next maybe few weeks.
Okay.
So I'll definitely let you all know.
Okay, awesome. And you also mentioned that maybe you'd like to come back and talk to us maybe next year when you have, and you are welcome to come back for everybody. No, seriously, we will talk to Dr. Marsh. Please come back. For everybody watching that, we are going to be starting. So this is the last one for the spring, but we are starting up again in early September, Thursday at 2:00 again. We're going straight through till the week before, the week before Thanksgiving. And we're taking a break for Thanksgiving and exams for the students. And we're starting again, I think, on January 16th, Thursday, January 16th. And we're going through till May. So please to join us on the Thursdays. Roger, it has been absolutely wonderful. You were fantastic. Tiana and Audrey, thanks for being together and being part of the team over the last few months. And then lastly, for people watching at home, I do want to let you know we have a lot of other really wonderful things coming up, even though we do have a break in social justice and community for the next little while. Our office, the Office of Human Rights, in partnership with the library, is doing some really neat things, including our Solidarity Stories community-led book discussion, which is held at Mixed Food Hall the third Tuesday of every month, is continuing on the third Tuesday of this month, which is the 21st. I'm making that date up. Go ahead and check. And we are reading They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. It's the graphic novel. Mixed Food Hall's got some food and drinks. Come join us. That's at 6:30 on Tuesday. We also have Allison Bettina Davis coming for Jewish American Heritage Month. We have I'm going to forget his name. We're doing the book Cinnamon Love as an Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month event, debut novel. And we have lots of wonderful things and an interfaith discussion coming up at Greenbelt Community Church on June 3rd. But the point is, go to our website, civilrights.mypgc.us, to see what we have going on, and visit the library at pgcmls.info/events to see what they have coming up, because between the two of us, we have lots for you every single day. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Roger. And we will see you all for Social Justice Community in September. Bye.